Welcome. Today we're going to take a really close look at a figure whose name is, well, it's basically synonymous with 1970s American glamour and ambition.
Roy Halston Frowick.
Known to the world, of course, simply as Halston.
Right, just Halston. And this is such a fascinating examination of uh, the business of creativity. We're tracing his evolution from, a milliner whose entire career was launched by one single perfectly placed hat,
An incredibly famous hat.
an incredibly famous hat, to an international fashion icon who just completely redefined what American style meant.
But we're also here to understand the other side of that story, the devastating corporate path that followed, which resulted in him losing all legal control over the very name he had so meticulously built.
Exactly. It's a profound lesson in branding, in art, and in commerce. You can't talk about American luxury fashion without him.
But you also can't ignore the cautionary tale that's embedded in everything that happened later.
It's true. I mean, he rose to international fame in the 70s with this aesthetic that was just a revelation. It was minimalist. It was clean.
It was modern.
Completely. This wasn't about, Parisian formality. This was about creating a sophisticated but relaxed urban lifestyle for women, something they could actually live in.
And when you think about the brand, the materials are just as important as the look itself.
Oh, absolutely. You immediately think of things like cashmere, of course, and ultra suede. He made a synthetic material feel like the height of aspiration.
And that's really key to his genius, isn't it? That blend of function and pure luxury. So to really understand the phenomenon, we have to go back to the American Midwest.
Roy Halston Frowick was born April 23, 1932, in Des Moines, Iowa.
And his background was pretty solid middle-class America. His father, James Edward Frowick, was an accountant.
Right, of Norwegian descent. And the source material really paints this clear picture of an early, just an innate talent. He got interested in sewing almost right away, mostly from his grandmother.
This wasn't just a small hobby either. He was altering clothes, he was creating custom hats for his mother and sister.
Which shows you that from the very beginning, it wasn't just about copying styles. It was about creating and adapting. He had a vision.
His family later moved to Evansville, Indiana when he was 14. He graduated high school, briefly went to Indiana University, but it seems pretty clear that a standard education wasn't going to hold him.
No, the drive was elsewhere. The center of fashion was calling, but he took that logical first step.
Which was Chicago.
Exactly. In 1952, he moves to Chicago, and this period is so foundational. He's not just, studying design in a vacuum. He's taking night courses at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
While working a day job.
A very practical job. He was a window dresser.
Yeah.
And you have to think about what that teaches a young designer.
It teaches you how to sell a vision, how to create instant appeal.
Precisely. And that skill would become absolutely critical later when he was crafting his own public image. And things moved fast for him. By 1953, he had already opened his own hat business.
And his first customer, which is just a wonderful piece of fashion history, was the radio actress Fran Allison.
It took him only a year to go from window dressing to being an entrepreneur. And his success was, well, it was almost immediate. His client list grew so quickly to include these major celebrities in the time.
We're talking about names like Kim Novak, Gloria Swanson,
Deborah Kerr, and even the incredibly powerful gossip columnist, Hedda Hopper. These weren't just clients, they were tastemakers. They were highly visible.
And that visibility got a huge boost when the Chicago Daily News ran a story on his hats. That was really his first big media break.
It gave him the social capital he needed to expand. So in 1957, he opens his first dedicated retail space, the Boulevard Salon, right on North Michigan Avenue.
And this is the moment, right? This is when Roy Frowick becomes simply Halston.
Yes, he formally adopts his middle name. The story is he wanted to distinguish his brand from his uncle, who was also named Roy. It was an early, critical move toward building that singular, recognizable name.
And the pace just picks up from there once he gets to New York.
He relocated in late 1957. First, he works for the famous milliner Lily Daché, and his rise there was incredibly fast. Within a year, he's named co-designer.
Which would have put him in direct contact with all the elite fashion editors in the city.
Then came the final key step in his hat-making career. He becomes head milliner for the custom salon at Bergdorf Goodman.
So now he's at the absolute nexus of social power in American luxury.
He's exactly where he needs to be. And all of that leads to the one singular moment that cements his place, not just in fashion, but in American cultural history forever.
1961, the presidential inauguration. He designed the pillbox hat worn by Jacqueline Kennedy.
And that was so much more than just a fashion choice. It was a cultural coronation. The image of the First Lady in that perfect, clean, slightly oversized pillbox hat, it defined a new era of American style.
Youthful, sophisticated.
And it gave him instant national recognition. It transformed him, really overnight, from a respected designer into a household name. It was the ultimate launchpad for everything that came next. But ironically, the very thing that made him famous, that structured, sophisticated hat, was starting to fall out of fashion in the mid-60s.
And Halston saw it coming. He had this incredible foresight to recognize the trend and make that crucial pivot from hats to women's clothing.
He knew he had to change with the times. But that kind of shift is a huge financial risk.
And our sources point out that for a really critical period, that transition was backed by just one person, a millionaire from Amarillo, Texas, named Estelle Marsh.
And that private backing gave him the freedom to really experiment and perfect his aesthetic without the immediate pressure of the market.
So with her support, he opens his first boutique on Madison Avenue in 1968.
And it's worth noting that his first clothing clients were the same kind of powerful, connected women who bought his hats. For example, he designed a wedding gown for Mary Wells Lawrence,
An advertising executive.
who, crucially, was about to marry the chairman of Braniff International Airways. That relationship becomes very important later on.
The real revolution, though, starts in 1969 when he launches his first ready-to-wear line, Halston Limited. This is where he really establishes the Halston look.
And we keep saying it was simple and minimalist, but we should really unpack what that meant. It was sophisticated, yes, and glamorous, but above all, it was comfortable. It was functional.
Fashion for a modern life. For movement.
Exactly. His design philosophy was an act of, well, aggressive reduction. He worked with these incredibly luxurious, soft fabric, silk, chiffon, cashmere.
But the material that really defined his approach was ultra suede.
Let's talk about ultra suede for a moment because it's so central to his innovation. It's a synthetic microfiber, it's durable, and it's washable.
Which was radical in an era where high fashion meant a trip to the dry cleaner.
And he didn't treat it like a cheap substitute. He used its unique properties, how it could drape but also hold a shape, to create garments that felt like expensive suede, but had the practicality of everyday clothes.
It was relaxed, functional elegance.
He actually explained his philosophy perfectly. He talked about stripping away working details that didn't work. There's a great quote where he says he got rid of bows that didn't tie, buttons that didn't button, zippers that didn't zip. I've always hated things that don't work.
That's practically the manifesto for modern American sportswear. He was designing for real life, not for a photo shoot.
His genius was letting the fabric itself do the work, often cutting on the bias to maximize that fluidity. And it was a direct contrast to the very fitted, structured silhouettes coming out of Europe. He was giving women freedom.
And you see that freedom most clearly in his advocacy for pants. He was instrumental in making pants a staple of high fashion for women.
A symbol of liberation, really. Power dressing.
He understood the shift that was happening in society. He once said, pants give women the freedom to move around they've never had before. They don't have to worry about getting into low furniture or low sports cars.
That quote just shows his awareness. He knew he wasn't just designing clothes, he was designing a new kind of lifestyle.
And beyond pants, of course, his simple silhouettes basically became the uniform of the disco era.
He created those elegant caftans for Jackie Kennedy, but the most famous piece has to be the matte jersey halter top dress.
A fabric that just drapes so beautifully. And the halter design was perfect for the dance floor. It showed skin, it caught the light, and it allowed for maximum movement.
That one silhouette really defined the whole Studio 54 era.
So by the early 1970s, Halston isn't just a designer anymore. He's a cultural institution.
His boutique on Madison Avenue was the epicenter of American glamour. The client list was, it was a who's who of international power and style.
You had Hollywood legends like Greta Garbo, Lauren Bacall, Elizabeth Taylor.
And then high society figures like Babe Paley. But critically, he also built these intense personal friendships with women who became his muses.
Most famously, Liza Minnelli and Bianca Jagger.
They weren't just clients. They were his constant, very photographed companions. They blurred the line between his personal life and his brand.
And all that visibility translated into, well, staggering financial success. The sources estimate that between 68 and 73, his line earned around $30 million.
This wasn't just a successful boutique. This was a fashion powerhouse. His influence was global. In 1970, the First Lady of Nicaragua, Hope Portocarrero, issued a postage stamp dedicated to him.
A postage stamp.
He was being celebrated by sovereign nations, and the American press confirmed it. Newsweek magazine called him the premier fashion designer of all America. His position was really undisputed.
This confidence leads him to what seemed like a brilliant move in 1973. He sells his line to a corporation, Norton Simon Inc., for $16 million.
But here's the crucial detail. The deal said he would retain his role as principal designer, so he kept creative control, but now he had almost unlimited financial backing.
And that move, tying creative genius to corporate finance, it set a really dangerous precedent for the whole industry.
That backing allowed for a massive expansion. Throughout the 70s, he adds menswear, luggage, handbags, lingerie, bedding.
His aesthetic was now being applied to every part of an affluent lifestyle.
But nothing showed the power of the brand, quite like the fragrance market. In 1975, Max Factor replaced his first perfume, Halston Classic.
In that amazing bottle designed by his friend Elsa Peretti, it was a work of art itself.
And that fragrance just exploded. By 1977, perfume sales alone had generated $85 million.
Which proves the name itself, Halston, had immense value, completely independent of the clothes.
Absolutely. And central to projecting that aspirational image was his hand-picked group of models.
The Halstonettes.
A name given to them by the fashion journalist Andre Leon Talley. And they were a revolutionary form of branding. They were the living embodiment of the Halston look.
We're talking about women like Pat Cleveland, Angelica Houston, Beverly Johnson.
Erin Bjornson, Alva Chen. They weren't just hired to walk a runway. They were his muses. They traveled everywhere with him.
And this is where his cultural impact really becomes clear. Halston was one of the first major designers to consistently hire models of different races for his shows and his ads.
In the 70s, that was not standard practice. He made diversity a core part of his brand identity, signaling that his vision of American glamour was inclusive and forward-thinking.
And this whole ecosystem, the fashion, the models, the fame, it was all anchored by his social life.
He was constantly photographed at Studio 54, the ultimate symbol of that era's decadence. His inner circle was Liza Minnelli, Bianca Jagger, Andy Warhol. He understood that being seen with the right people in the right place was marketing. He was selling a dream of effortless sophistication.
But Halston's ambition wasn't just limited to dressing the celebrity elite. He saw how his minimalist functional style could shape the visual identity of American business.
Which led him into the uniform sector, where he signed some of his most surprising and massive contracts.
Most famous was definitely with Braniff International Airways in 1977.
Braniff wanted to project this image of contemporary high-class elegance, and they hired Halston to redesign everything.
The genius was the system he created. He designed these interchangeable separates in muted shades bone, tan, taupe with a little H logo.
The focus on interchangeable pieces meant they were practical for employees, but they still projected this very high style.
The campaign itself was called Ultra Touch,
A direct nod to his popularization of ultra suede. And Braniff went all in. The look wasn't just the uniforms, it extended to the aircraft interiors with brown Argentine leather seat covers. It was all part of their elegance campaign.
The launch was pure spectacle, a huge party called 3 Nights in Acapulco in February of '77.
And all the big names were there. The chairman of Braniff, Harding Lawrence, and his wife Mary Halston's client, even Lady Bird Johnson.
And Halston, of course, arrived with his Halstonettes.
Who were wearing outfits that perfectly matched the new uniform colors. It was all highly choreographed PR. But the key thing is, the uniforms were a huge success, not just visually, but functionally.
The employees said they were the easiest and most comfortable they had ever worn.
Which just validated his entire philosophy. Simplicity equals functionality.
And that success proved he could apply his aesthetic anywhere. His uniform commissions were incredibly diverse.
The list is astonishing. He designed for the U.S. Olympic Committee for the 1976 Pan American Games.
But then you have a contract for the Girl Scouts, a massive mass-market group.
For them, he focused on ease of movement, washability, making it practical for young girls. Again, simplicity over fussy details.
And then the really surprising one, the New York Police Department.
Right, the NYPD. The fact that a high-fashion designer was brought in to create functional, modern clothing for police officers, it just shows the height of his commercial power at that time. He also did the uniforms for Avis Rent-A-Car.
He genuinely believed that high style should be for everyone, whether you're a flight attendant or a Girl Scout.
But that very belief in democratization would ultimately lead to his professional ruin.
And now we get to the real inflection point of his career, the story that has become the ultimate cautionary tale in luxury branding.
The J.C. Penney deal. In 1983, Halston signs a 6-year licensing deal with the mid-priced retail chain J.C. Penney. And the reported value was just staggering.
$1 billion.
$1 billion. This was supposed to be the first true designer collaboration for the masses, years before that became common practice.
The line was called Halston III. It was affordable clothing, accessories, perfume, with prices set between, what, $24 and $200?
And his argument was revolutionary. Why should only a small elite be able to afford good design? He wanted to bring his aesthetic to the entire country.
But the reaction from the luxury fashion world was not celebratory. It was immediate condemnation.
At that time, no high-end designer of his stature had ever licensed their name to a mass-market chain. The establishment felt he had irrevocably cheapened his name.
Diluted his exclusivity.
And the most immediate, most devastating consequence was that Bergdorf Goodman, the store that had been his professional home for decades, dropped his high-end Halston Limited line completely.
That wasn't just losing a retail account. That was a rejection by the very establishment that had built him up.
It was a clear signal that the luxury world saw mass-market accessibility as the death of cachet.
And while he was dealing with that public fallout, behind the scenes, the corporate ownership of his name was just collapsing into this frantic series of acquisitions.
The corporate carousel. Halston Limited was still owned by Norton Simon, but then that whole company was acquired by S-Mark Inc. in 1983.
And that change of ownership immediately shifted the power dynamics.
Halston's frustration just mounted. He started losing authority over his own company, even the high-end line. And the instability just got worse.
The label was sold again and again, from S-Mark to Playtex International, then to Beatrice Foods, and eventually 4 other companies.
And every time it was sold, the new owners just saw the name as a product to be licensed, not an artistic vision to be nurtured. This systematically stripped him of any real power.
The final blow came in 1984.
The corporate owners acted decisively. Halston was formally banned from designing for Halston Enterprises. He was replaced by John David Ridge.
Just think about that. The designer was legally barred from practicing his craft under his own name.
He had sold the name, and the license holder was now using its power to silence him. He tried to fight it. He entered into these long negotiations to try and buy his company back.
But he was completely outmatched by these massive corporations. His attempts failed.
In 1986, Revlon acquires Halston Enterprises. He remained on salary, but the damage was done. He stopped designing clothing for the company entirely. He was essentially paid to stay quiet.
But even though he was sidelined by his own company, that creative impulse never left him. He kept designing for his friends, especially for Liza Minnelli.
And he took on a really meaningful, non-commercial project, designing costumes for the Martha Graham Dance Company's Temptations of the Moon. It showed where his artistic loyalty really was.
In the end, Revlon decided to discontinue the clothing line in 1990. They realized how hard it was to sustain the brand without the genius behind it.
But they wisely continued to sell the incredibly lucrative Halston perfumes.
While his professional life was this incredible public story of glamour and then tragedy, his personal life was just as rich and complex.
His primary relationship, which was often on again, off again, lasted for just over 10 years. It was with a Venezuelan-born artist named Victor Hugo.
They met in 1972. Hugo was a makeup artist, and he later worked as Halston's window dresser.
Which was so characteristic of his life, wasn't it? Everything, personal, professional, it was all intertwined.
And the New York Times also reported he had an affair with the fashion designer Luis Estevez, which just illustrates how vibrant his social life was within that creative community.
As we move to his final years, we have to do so with a great deal of sympathy for the suffering he endured and for the devastating impact the AIDS crisis had on that entire generation of artists.
In 1988, Halston tested positive for HIV. As his health began to decline, he moved to San Francisco to be cared for by his family, away from the public eye of New York.
He died on March 26, 1990, at the California Pacific Medical Center in San Francisco. He was only 57 years old.
The cause of death was Kaposi sarcoma, an AIDS-related illness.
It's a form of cancer that causes painful lesions, and it was a common and devastating manifestation of the disease at that time. His remains were cremated.
His death was a profound loss, and his friends immediately came together to commemorate him. In June of 1990, Liza Minnelli, his most devoted friend and muse, sponsored a tribute at Lincoln Center.
And that was followed by a reception hosted by the jewelry designer Elsa Peretti, the same friend who designed that iconic perfume bottle. It was a final gathering of the circle that had defined his years of glamour, a moment to reflect on the immense talent that was taken far too soon.
Halston's death, you would think, would have provided some clarity for his legacy, but instead it just marked the beginning of this almost continuous cycle of corporate instability.
Everyone was trying to monetize the power of his name, but without the guiding vision of the man himself. It became clear the name was valuable, but the genius needed to make the clothes successful was missing.
The company has just gone through this relentless series of acquisitions since 1990, each one an attempt to resurrect the brand's credibility.
The pattern is what's important. In 1996, the clothing license was bought by a company called Tropic Tex Revlon. Smartly, kept the fragrance rights, and they hired a designer, Randolph Duke, to relaunch the line.
And for a moment, it worked. Duke's collection was critically acclaimed. He got the name back on the red carpet.
The high point was when Minnie Driver wore a crimson Halston dress to the Academy Awards. Celebrities like Mariah Carey and Celine Dion started wearing it again. It proved the name still had pull.
But the instability continued. Duke left after the company was sold again in 1998. They brought in another designer, Kevin Hall, who also got great reviews.
But again, corporate instability. The company was sold, and Hall left in 2000. It's this sad pattern where the talent was there, but the corporate patience just wasn't.
The cycle just kept going. A new owner hired designer Bradley Bayou to relaunch Halston as a purely high-end brand.
And it was visible. Oprah Winfrey wore it, Queen Latifah wore it. But Bayou left in 2005, frustrated by a lack of funding for advertising. You can't succeed in modern fashion without marketing.
The most high-profile, star-studded attempt came in 2006.
The dream team, it seemed. Jimmy Choo, co-founder Tamra Mellon, stylist Rachel Zoe, and the film producer Harvey Weinstein. They had money, fashion expertise, celebrity access.
But again, internal disputes, they couldn't find a consistent design voice. Then they tried a different approach, launching a more accessible line called Halston Heritage,
which used archived sketches from Halston himself, updated. And they brought in massive star power in 2009, Sarah Jessica Parker. She not only wore the clothes in Sex and the City too, but she was hired as president and chief creative officer.
But even that combination of forces couldn't stabilize the brand. A new designer's collection debuted to negative reviews in 2011.
And almost immediately, Sarah Jessica Parker, the designer, and Harvey Weinstein all left the company.
This intense cycle finally subsided. The owners consolidated, moved the headquarters to LA, and focused exclusively on the Halston Heritage ready-to-wear line.
And through all of this, Halston's actual design influence never went away. The critic Robin Given noted that when Tom Ford was relaunching Gucci and YSL in the late 90s, he drew direct inspiration from Halston's glittering glamour.
His influence defined late 20th century luxury, whether he got the credit for it or not. The name lives on today, though it's still a complex corporate entity, forever tied to the success of the perfumes.
And thankfully, his legacy is being protected. There are important documentaries, Ultra Suede, In Search of Halston, and the more recent one from 2019, Halston.
And crucial archival work is preserving the physical history of his genius. Exhibitions curated by his niece, Leslie Frowick, using materials from his own personal archives that he had gifted to her.
And perhaps most movingly, one of the original Halstonettes, Chris Royer, was voted the Halston Archivist and has developed an archive of over 300 unique vintage pieces. That dedication ensures his groundbreaking work is protected for the future.
Halston's life is just this mesmerizing account of ambition, celebrity, and, well, unbridled artistic genius. We've traced his journey from that simple pillbox hat to his reign as the architect of 1970s glamour.
He gave women freedom of movement and the sophistication of high fashion, all wrapped up in washable ultra suede.
But the contrast is so stark. He went from having immense creative control, especially after that 1973 Norton-Simon deal, to the heartbreaking reality of being legally barred from designing for the company that bore his own name.
All because of the relentless corporate acquisitions that followed his pursuit of mass market relevance.
His decision to pursue that JCPenney deal came from a genuine, but you could say ultimately fatal belief that luxury style should be accessible to everyone. He didn't see it as cheapening his brand.
No, he saw it as realizing its full potential. And that ambition was really the core of his tragedy. Halston's genius was in simplifying fashion, stripping away the unnecessary to create this fluid, functional luxury. But he ran headlong into the very complex limits of turning a personal, high-end brand into a mass-market corporate empire.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought for you to consider.
If the goal of the greatest designers is to simplify life through elegant design. What is the complex and often devastating cost, both commercially and personally, of trying to democratize that very luxury?